what I was told.
You're saying, and pardon my a lot of grammar corrections that may need to take place while we go through this, but we'll try to go that way if we can. How does that sound for folks?
You should be able to show yours now too, Ryan. Or instead.
So can you see that? So green, it's in suggesting mode. So create a centralized resource hub overseen and implemented by the Office of Behavioral Health that includes providers of prevention, treatment, and recovery support services, and combines and incorporates current resource directories and services. Ensure provider communities across the continuum of services are aware of the hub and ensure hub is consistently updated. And then kind of that last bullet is listed providers should be vetted entities. Just like James, you talked about, is like, I don't necessarily know if we want state endorsed or certified. I mean, we definitely can't do the licensed piece because some entities that I think would be really good on this list wouldn't necessarily be. But we're not there yet with the behavioral health system. So we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently excluding folks from this recommendation. Thoughts? What did I miss? What do we need to further clarify?
How about if we have the service providers register with the hub? So in order to be listed as a resource, if we could create a system where they register as a resource, that could help with the vetting piece. I'm not quite sure how to word that in that item, that third bullet, but maybe that would help that process a bit.
I like that.
That puts it back on the service organization too.
This is Marcella. When it says be available in multiple languages, I'm not sure what that means exactly. Does it mean that it will include resources that provide services in multiple languages and culturally responsive, or only that their information will be available in various languages? Because oftentimes that's very misleading to people when something is translated to Spanish, and then when you call, in fact, they have no clue what to say. They don't provide services in Spanish. And so I'm wondering what it means when you say be available. What would be available in multiple languages?
This is Margie. It might be that when people when they register, there could be like an application where you're collecting that data. So you can ask specific questions. What geographic area do you cover? Do you provide resources in different languages? So that when they're doing that registration or application process, then you've collected that information so people are really clear what the parameters are that group, what services they do provide, and so people don't make 10 calls before they find the one that they're looking for.
I think that bullet is referring to, it's talking about accessibility. So it's talking about being available in multiple languages to find resources. I'm not seeing that it says having resources that include providing it in multiple languages. But that's something that potentially, we could encourage through a hub, obviously, is please let us know if you offer these things that we could list that specifically.
Yeah, that's what I was, I didn't express it clearly, Julie. That was, I was thinking, so if you've listed an organization, then that would be included in their description of what they do provide.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, I may have misunderstood as well. And then Ryan, on the vetted, could we just say listed providers should be registered with the hub and not add that vetted component, only because that may create the issue of who's vetting me and who's leaving me out and that kind of thing. The registered process would allow people to screen people, and then it could be determined when this is established who might actually be evaluating.
Yeah, so how does that third bullet look? And then I think we need to go back to this first and second bullet, because it feels like the conversation about be available in multiple language is probably more about the hub should include resources that support social determinants of health, such as assistance with concrete needs, as well as services provided, I mean, to diverse communities or whatever language we want to add for the second one. So it doesn't, just like Marcella said, so it doesn't look like, oh yeah, the hub or the resource, all these resources are going to be in a bunch of different languages, but if you call there expecting to have someone speak Mandarin, like it's going to be a tough and probably discourage folks.
I can
Marcella,
see.
oh, sorry, Marcella, how
Sorry.
could we word that on bullet 2? What is your suggestion to clarify that? Because I think that's important.
On bullet 2, well, I don't know that bullet 2 is as concerning to me as the first one. The first bullet just seems I'm not sure what's supposed to be available in multiple languages.
The list of services, I think, is what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just from experience, if I see something in Spanish, then I assume and we get excited about the fact that yes, we're welcome there because they'll provide it in Spanish, and then that's not true. And so I think we just need to clarify what is available in multiple languages. Only the data?
I think in that sentence is saying that the hub should be available in multiple languages. Because hub is the subject of the sentence, but I can also see where as entities opt in to be on this resource list, that there's a registration form that would they could identify that they have services, and with the hub being searchable, people who want services in Spanish could check that, and then only services that are available in Spanish would come up.
And maybe just add to that bullet then that the data will be available in multiple languages, and then have a clarifier on bullet 2, possibly about what we're talking about, that the resource will define if they offer that particular service.
Yeah. One of the challenges that we face that idea is that increasingly there are so many languages that walk in our door. Even owners of agencies that provide interpreters and translators are really struggling because it's difficult to staff those agencies with truly multilingual individuals to the level that they could interpret and provide services and so on. So it's amazing to me. I'm not sure what has happened, but we get faced with, there's been a couple of languages that I never even heard of that have come up recently. So we must really be getting increasingly diverse. I like that, Victoria.
So if I'm following along correctly. So bullet 1 here is about the hub, making it, I mean, available, accessible on multiple platforms, searchable by service type. We're not necessarily defining what those service types are, but we can kind of think that it's going to be a multicultural services and whatnot. Could be a service type or a category you fill out when you're registering with the hub, like I provide Spanish speaking services, right? And so then bullet 2 will be that the hub should include resources to support social determinants of health, such as assistance with concrete needs, and identify, I mean, services available or service delivery in a culturally appropriate manner, or like, how do we get to the spot where we want to specifically speak about like making sure that there's services and that you can, if you're seeking a specific type of service delivered in a specific way, how can we ensure that the resource hub has that ability to check the box if you're Spanish speaking, and then you kind of populate the resources that are more Spanish speaking specific. I mean, how do we make that bullet number 2 get that point across?
Ryan, I think Victoria said it very well in the chat. So she said we could add searchable by provider type, cultural competencies, and languages spoken fluently. I think you could copy it out of the chat if you need to. Does that clarify it, Marcella?
That's really helping. I think it's culturally responsive, and languages, not only spoken, but
I have a question
and
about the term.
service languages. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask. It's a different on the second bullet. The term concrete is sort of nebulous, maybe.
As concrete as it is. Nebulous.
I guess if I were, I don't know, if I didn't know what we know, I'd be what are concrete needs? Like I may not associate that with housing and food and such, immediate needs or essential needs, maybe. I don't know. Is that what we intended to be, like essential needs?
I think you can shorten it by culturally responsive and literate, culturally and language responsiveness.
So moving,
I'm not sure what fluent means necessarily, but yeah. Culturally and linguistically competent.
like here, culturally
And linguistically, that's the languages, culturally and linguistically competent. Or responsive, either word. Culturally and linguistically competent, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then Lorraine was talking about bullet point 2, where we have concrete needs, maybe a different word that would help that be more clear. Maybe something like housing, employment, and other basic needs.
I like that.
Okay, guys, how do you feel about number 1 at this point?
I actually only have one other question regarding that, but it applies to the others. Why are we using the word should? Is it will? Hub will maximize accessibility? Because the word should is throughout, it seems like it's throughout the document.
I think that has to do with it's just a recommendation at this point, right?
Yeah, it was indicating the dream list and what we want it to do, but we could definitely put it in more specific terms for sending forward as our formal recommendation.
Yeah, I have no problem having the stronger will than the should. I mean, yeah, these are recommendations coming from Bhpac saying that, yeah, we may not reach that level, but this is what we want it to look like. So yeah, I mean, having them as strong as we can get them is, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, guys, what do you think of number 1? I want to be sure we can have at least 10 minutes for the rest of these two to discuss, to finalize as well. But I want it to be right. I want you guys to be happy. So what do you feel about number 1? Do you think we've got our wording correct and that we've covered it and it's clear?
So would that change it to hub will maximize accessibility to be functional on multiple technological platforms and be searchable by provider type? To be functional on multiple.
That's on bullet 1, Ryan.
Rather than say making it functional, to be functional. Because I like the explanation that Brian just offered. This is the plan, so it's to be functional.
Are we here? Motion to approve this language?
Motion.
I so move. Marcella, I so move.
Well, Karen beat you to it, so are you seconding that, Marcella?
Sure, right. Yes.
Julie and Caitlin, I'm kind of stealing your board.
You're great. You're great. Carry on.
So all in favor of this motion, or if this is kind of your opportunity now to make those other formal requests to change. If not, I mean, I think we'll go backwards. Anyone either choosing to say no to this motion that has been seconded or abstaining, or otherwise, do we as a group want to support this unanimously? So with that, anyone not in favor of this recommendation number 1 as amended and laid out before you? With that, it sounds like a unanimous here. Thumbs up from folks. I think I can see 20 of you. Lloyd has a hand raised. Thumb is kind of out.
That hand raise was a yes. Okay with it.
Excellent. All right, we will go to number 2. Everybody look at number 2 on the screen or in your own printed format and let us know where we need to make some adjustments in wording on number 2. You can already see we've got the would and the should wording. Would is in bullet 1, should is in bullet 2 that we'll need to firm up. I think bullet 1, we could just change it to, yeah, will or to help. Yeah.
Is the opening sentence supposed to say communicate funding? It says marketing and communication funding opportunities.
Communication, I think, is correct from a marketing and communications standpoint on sharing about these things.
So should there be a period then, and then?
Well, we're saying marketing and communication funding opportunities, helping people fund the ability to market and share this.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Good question.
Still a little unclear, if you know what I'm saying. So just let's see.
What's unclear, Lorraine?
Well, it's us kind of maybe an awkward sentence. No, I just think like what Victoria might have been saying is it makes you think, at least it may imply that the marketing communication funding opportunities, that's the part, I don't know, it just seems rough a little bit.
We could say ensure consumers are consistently made aware of funding opportunities to market and for marketing and communication of resources.
Yeah, that makes it better, I think.
Okay.
I think it's
I'm not sure
more
though.
powerful. Ensure consumers are consistently informed of funding opportunities. It's stronger than just made aware. It's to inform. It's to educate.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the consumers though. This is really about outreach opportunities and providing money so that organizations can reach out to consumers. So it's not that the consumers need the funding opportunities. The consumers need to be made aware of services by providing funding opportunities to service entities, service providers.
We should change consumers to organizations are given this to inform consumers, or switch around the wording again. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So resources to provide marketing and communication is where you left off, Ryan, and then we got to go back and fix consumers.
Okay, so generally what we're talking about here is we want to make sure that there's funding opportunities available to ensure that consumers have knowledge and access to services across the continuum. And that's through marketing, communication, funding opportunities to ensure that different types of service delivery can be promoted. That's generally what we're talking about with this recommendation, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so
I think you can switch consumers and organizations in the sentence possibly to fix it, to ensure organizations are consistently made aware of funding opportunities for marketing and communication, for resources for marketing and communication, to inform consumers across the continuum of behavioral health supports.
for marketing communication.
Did that fix it, or did we make it worse?
I'm sorry, I've lost track of actually what it says. It's a really difficult sentence for me, and that's okay. I'm just trying to make sure what it is that we're trying to communicate with this one.
I think it should, I think what we're trying to say is that OBH, we're asking them to use the dollars to fund marketing and communications outreach to make consumers aware of services.
Thank you for simplifying that.
You're welcome.
So not of funding opportunities.
It's a funding opportunity to providers so that they can conduct outreach and market to potential consumers. So for example, right now, Southeast Health Group has a grant from Signal Behavioral Health to fund the Tough as a Mother campaign. So we're just blasting our social media networks with ads about Tough as a Mother and how to get substance use disorder services. So it's that kind of program where we get funding from Signal to do that.
We're scrapping this first sentence and we're revamping it to what Nancy was saying, Ryan. Nancy, can you say that again?
Or can you throw it in the chat?
Yeah.
I will chat that right now.
Thank you.
It's a simple thing. I liked Marcella's suggestion to change made aware to informed.
Yeah, let's see what the new sentence looks like and we'll make sure we have that firmly stated.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe part of the issue with this one is the use of aware. I think it's really difficult to have one organization be held to saying that another organization or person is going to pay attention. Maybe what you can ask OBH to ensure that they promptly and consistently provide information about blah, blah, blah. You can't say they're going to make other people aware.
Okay, so we've got in the chat, provide funding to organizations to conduct marketing and outreach activities so consumers are aware of resources available to them. So instead of aware in that sentence, Laura, what do you think?
I was talking about the one the providers are aware, but if you say provide funding, what does that mean? We're just gonna provide funding or funding opportunity? Right,
so we'll add opportunity back in there.
Right, so OBH's responsibility would be to ensure that they consistently and timely supply information about the opportunity. You know what I mean? Not make people aware. If I'm not paying attention to my email and I got a blast on the funding opportunity, that's my problem, not OBH's problem. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
Timely and consistent.
Okay, how do we do, guys? Is that sentence clearer and have every piece that you want it to have?
Is one of the issues that we're getting at here is the inequity and some folks knowing about funding opportunities and other people not? Is that what we're getting at here?
I think it's just for everyone to be aware of the funding opportunities to market
Okay.
outreach activities. So
And I think we need to ask that OBH direct some of the dollars to marketing and outreach.
So I have to say, because when sentences are real long, I have to say Spanish is my first language, so I'm always trying to say what, right? And so so it helps if it's more succinct on funding opportunities to organizations for marketing and outreach activities. I always think, like, how would I translate that? And when the more words, the more challenging. Yeah, for marketing and outreach activities.
So taking out so consumers are aware of resources.
To inform consumers of resources available.
Just need an S on consumers. Yeah. Okay, how is that?
That's much clearer. I can translate that real easy.
Thank you for giving us the translation perspective. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, not only,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, not only for translation, but for people who have learning disabilities. I'm dyslexic, and I get lost when there are paragraphs of text. The more succinct it is, the easier it is for me to read too.
Thank you for that reminder as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, how are the bullet points in number 2? Are you guys good with those? Okay, are we on to a motion for number 2 then, if I don't have any comments on the bullets, or where are we? Ryan, I'll let you go for that.
Who's willing to put forth a motion? So we'll accept this.
Motion,
I missed it, sorry.
Karen, motion.
Who's my second? Laura, I saw a hand raised. So all in favor, raise your hand. Then we'll give everyone a second to either lower their hands or take their thumb up on the screen down. And then anyone opposed, here's your opportunity to put forth some sort of gesture, either directed directly at me or on the screen?
Be careful what you ask for, Ryan.
Hey, I mean, luckily we're not in the same room, so can't hurt that bad. And then anyone wishing to abstain from the vote on this? Otherwise, it's looking like a unanimous vote. All right, with that, recommendation number 2 passes unanimously. Thank you. So moving to number 3, fund additional no-cost opportunities for professional development, including trainings on trauma-informed care, provider burnout, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and increase ability of high-quality, equitable services.
So I think to include trainings or can include trainings, but I believe that it really should say a little bit higher level than trauma informed, because that just means you know about it. But if it's trauma responsive, not only do you know about it, you can respond. So trauma responsive care.
I would add vicarious trauma to the provider burnout / vicarious trauma.
Ryan, on bullet point 1, we just need to add the between across and continuum and explore and universe.
This may be nitpicky, but since we're rolling in social determinants to bullet 1, we may want to add, because not everyone is aware of how social determinants might affect someone's mental well-being to the list of trainings.
Good point, Victoria.
Wait, add where?
Up in the intro statement, just putting social, probably vicarious trauma, comma, social determinants of health, and
So what if we did this a little bit backwards, where kind of we start with to increase availability of high quality equitable services, OBH will fund additional costs.
And then put a period after professional development to break up this sentence and say the training will include trauma responsive care provider, something like that, something.
Another piece with that, should that be a bullet? So it's opening up as 3 as to increase availability of high quality equitable services. OBH will fund additional no cost opportunities for professional development. That's the first. Next
That
bullet
makes sense. I agree, that makes sense, Ryan.
Brian, this is Margie. I can't remember what meeting, but I think it was last month when Robert Wertheim, somewhere I heard him talk about the state having kind of an umbrella of different trainings available. Where I see this will fund additional no-cost opportunities, should this include, so that anyone can, where would pick a training? If I said I want to pick a training on social determinants of health, then I would go and find where that was being offered and then request funding for it. I guess I'm trying to think of logistics, difference between offer/fund.
Yeah, so I think it's going to have to be a little bit different than what you just brought up. You couldn't necessarily go, I'm going to go pick out a training that I've identified and then seek to get reimbursement for it. To me, it feels like it's going to have to be some sort of platform, which I think that's what Robert was talking about, like a state's learning management system where you can go to essentially state endorsed, potentially state delivered trainings that would be the no cost opportunities for professional development. And we're identifying that those opportunities need to cover certain topics here.
So, and I guess then that would be my question versus that it would be very state structured versus, I'll just use an example. The Colorado Federation, for example, the National Federation has conferences that can be very beneficial for family members and family advocates. But because that wouldn't be a state-sponsored training, then that would not be where these funds would be available. They would only be available to things that the state has created or has given their stamp of approval that would qualify to receive these funds.
Yeah, I guess I'd open that up to discussion as a whole here about, what are we thinking, and then how do we, or as the state, how do we ensure that those, types of trainings delivered by a different entity in a different capacity than the state are vetted and appropriate use of funds as part of it, right? Because that's the other piece to this, is that it's going to tie all back to, by and large, OBH is funded from taxpayer dollars, and being consistent with taxpayer dollars and showing exactly what we're spending dollars on that's part of the game that OBH has to ensure is happening. And that's, I think, the background to why, essentially a state delivered training on a state platform. I'm just thinking about how the response next month is potentially going to come if it's essentially a reimbursement program for trainings that you can potentially take anywhere. I think it's going to be a little bit harder for us to respond to something like that versus
And I wasn't saying that the state should be paying for that. I'm just saying that I think it's important to clarify exactly what the parameters are for the use of this kind of funding.
I have two questions that are kind of connected to this. May I ask them?
Mm-hmm.
My first question and kind of thought is kind of what Margie was saying. Well, I guess my first thought, not question, is making sure that we have everything credentialed and nice, and so we can make sure that the trainings are good for everyone and not harmful. But I would want to include that these trainings are reviewed or done by peers in certain areas. That, like, diversity, for example, is not just training from ethical ethnicity diversity, but also disability diversity. And you have people with lived experience provide training on how to best engage and approach them in a way that's effective and respectful. And then my next question that's kind of related to this is, when you say professional development, are you also including peers in that, the peer professionals? Or is this just provider available for people that have licensing as providers and social workers? So those were my two thoughts and questions.
So Ryan, on bullet 3, where it says disperse funds to expert facilitators, could we do some defining there of, you know, expert facilitators, including peers, and I'm not sure what would be the proper wording. Somebody have an idea there?
Potentially subject matter experts, which include peers, family members, people with extensive background knowledge in like trauma-informed care. I don't want to make it too long and complicated, but that's kind of what I would put.
Thank you. Subject matter experts instead of expert facilitators. The subject matter experts then would include peers and family members.
Should we do something like lead and or create trainings?
They're also going to provide the training, right? They're also going to facilitate the training, not only create, or create and / facilitate, because some might create and somebody else might facilitate that training.
So is this?
Yeah, take out lead and or, and it'll be good. Got to create. Okay, guys, how does number 3 look to everybody? Any other changes, suggestions, thoughts?
Can I ask, who will be selecting these experts? Will OPH be selecting them? Do we know yet?
Marcella, I think you bring up a really good point about, I think there's one bullet that's missing here about like the vetting of any of these trainings, right? Whether it's on a learning management system, whether it's on a, oh, we're going to have this expert come in, or this group of experts come in and do this specific training. Like, how do we, I mean, I think ideally that a group like this would be part of that discussion as well, and kind of use it as a whole stakeholder process about what the state needs and wants. But also I want to get back to a thing that Ty brought up about no-cost opportunities for professional development. I absolutely think peers are involved in that professional development, but do we need to expand this to, I mean, no-cost opportunities for service delivery that better informs families, that better informs individuals, that this is maybe what you can generally expect out of behavioral health system. So it's not just about professional development, but it's about increasing the baseline knowledge about behavioral health as a whole, or maybe that's a completely different thing.
I think
I bring that up because we had the same conversation in the 2765 stakeholder group, where it's not always just about professional development, because I think a lot of training, even if it is professional development training, can go a long way for families, loved ones, individuals just interested in behavioral health to participate. And maybe that's just a behind the scenes look at maybe what I'm thinking. If OBH is implementing something like that, is make it completely available. It's not just professional development.
And behavioral health education after professional development.
This is Margie, and this might be totally off the wall, but you know, in number 1 where we talked about that hub for resources, I get so many emails from so many different entities that are providing webinars and trainings. It's hard to consolidate. Maybe there is a part of this that could be that hub of where these different types of trainings are available that could also be helpful for people, so that you're saying if you want to be trained on mental health crisis, I'm not using the word wrong, but there's so many different things at the state where there's opportunities for people to be informed and to learn. That kind of hub would be, so it's not, you're not providing the trainings, but it's making people aware of where those training opportunities are housed.
I think bullet number 2 addresses that, Margie, but look at it and see if that's what you see in that.
Yeah, and Margie, I think you're exactly right, is that with the hub, with the resource hub, it's not, I don't think we would necessarily just have it as this is a service delivery hub, but also an opportunity is that if you're going here searching for something related to behavioral health, there's also an opportunity to search out. I want to specifically learn about this, and here's essentially
Right.
state endorsed training specific about this. That is a resource to me as well.
And then families, I mean, then different people can find that place and say, boy, that's something that I really do need to know about, so that it does expand who your audience of recipients would be.
Where do we land with number 3 here? We ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve number 3.
Do we have a second? I saw Marcella.
I will
raise her
second.
hand.
Sorry, I'll second.
I saw Marcella's hand go up first.
Cool.
So with that, further discussion on this, there is a motion, there is a second. Before we get to a vote. Not hearing any further discussion, or I heard something. Or is that just me? So with that, all in favor of recommendation 3 to increase the availability of high quality equitable services, OBH will fund additional no-cost opportunities for professional development and behavioral health education. All in favor, raise those hands, make some sort of motion that can identify as a yes, and allow everyone that opportunity to put their hands down. Anyone opposed? Lloyd's claps and Margie's thumb up, I'll take are still as the support. Anyone wishing to abstain from this vote for recommendation number 3? That recommendation number 3 unanimous. So I think we are at 6, so we're halfway through.
Yep. Do you want to do a break at this point, Ryan? And then
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to gauge the?
I'm seeing a little bit of Zoom fatigue on some of the faces, so I think it would be a good time to take a break and then come back and finish up the last 3. So let's do 10 minutes. It's 10:30, so 10:40 we'll resume, and we'll finish 4, 5, and 6. Thank you, guys. Get started again. Sorry, I got sidetracked and we're a few minutes late, but probably needed the extra time anyway. We're going to pick back up where we left off with recommendation number 3. I'm sorry, 4. We're on 4, doing 4, 5, and 6. And I'll let Ryan pull his screen back up for us. There we are. All right, what discussion do we have on number 4?
I have,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Can someone identify what they mean by the regional organizations providing services across the continuum?
Does anybody have some wordsmithing or ideas on number 4?
Nancy, I'm assuming that's like Medicaid raise, the MSOs, the ASOs, I mean, community mental health centers. But I think you bring up a good point. Do we want to specifically call that out here? And also, are those not the entities we're talking about?
Right.
Which
That's kind
either
of
way, clarification is needed.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry, Nancy, I had the mute button on. I didn't hear you. I apologize.
Is it continuum that we're talking about? I think in that case, it was meant like the continuum that BPAC is addressing. So prevention, treatment, recovery.
Yeah, I guess then I think maybe the regional is what's throwing me off. I don't want to speak for Nancy, but the regional organizations are oftentimes referred to as those funding and umbrella organizations. But yeah, I mean, I see where you're at, Caitlin, too, where we're talking about essentially all providers, whether you're part of the state funded system or not, ensuring and promoting across the full behavioral health continuum.
I would agree with that, Ryan.
Ty, go ahead.
Again, I'm dyslexic, so if I'm misinterpreting or reading this wrong, I apologize. And I don't know if this is in the spirit of what this is trying to do, but when I read it, I think more peer involvement would be nice in decision making. A long time ago, SAMHSA had initiative that peers should be a part of all levels of decision making, from executive to bottom. So I don't know if this is something we can do, but maybe prioritize agencies that have peer voice on their board of directors, recommend that councils and committees have more peer voice within the within their organization. Just trying to incorporate that what I feel is, you know, and maybe I'm reading this wrong. I read this and I'm thinking that Colorado is a satisfaction-based state now, and more entities are welcoming peer voice, but not all are effective in doing it.
And Ty, if you look at number 5, I think that is where we address the peer issue.
Okay, I was just reading like across the continuum by endorsing, collaborating, and promoting warm, hands-off, and standard information sharing. I was kind of reading that as peers should be involved. So again, I wasn't sure if this was the appropriate place or not, but that's kind of where my mind jumped to.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. I mean, I get where you're coming from with this, with that, absolutely. Part of this recommendation, I read this as is really that endorsement of like the Behavioral Health Administration, the getting that up and going. That bill passed just a couple weeks or signed by the governor a few weeks ago, and like continue to move that forward. And through that process with the Behavioral Task Force and all of that, and the involvement of peers in that whole process of service delivery, I think there's a component to that. The other piece to that is, do we want to build that specifically in here, or kind of let that run its course? And our recommendation is really to promote or encourage that the Behavioral Health Administration run its course to create a new system that better involves people in decision making, and establishment of kind of all services along the continuum. And with that, it's not just the Behavioral Health Administration as well. I mean, it's Senate Bill 19222 and the safety net services, and how do we make informed decisions about what a safety net provider is and what a continuum of safety net services is, and making sure that we have the right people allowed to have the opportunity to weigh in. I mean, it shouldn't even be an allowance. It should be making sure that people are weighing in on those processes. So that's kind of how I'm seeing 4 as well. But yeah, Lloyd.
Lloyd here. So I definitely hear everything you're saying, Ryan, but I also hear what Ty is saying. As we know from prior experience, is not every recommendation gets accepted. So wherever, for example, peers might need to be involved or should be involved, is that we should include that wording, in my opinion.
Should we add peer after between peer and regional organizations, or?
You know, just in response to what Ryan was saying earlier, when you say the right people, peers are part of that right people. And I think that gets forgotten at times. So it would be nice if it's spelled out in there somewhere, just so people don't think we only need the payers and the providers, but also really the subject matter experts are the people that receive the services, and how we can best address collaborations and promote the best wellness recovery tools is having all those voices. So, and again, I'm sorry if I was confused, but I think, it's always good to incorporate that where you can.
Yep, Ty, and I think we do add a bullet here specific to ensure, I mean, so I made the change from regional to all. Thanks, Gloria. I mean, I think that fits a little bit better what we're talking about. Is we're talking about providers across the continuum, not just specific payers, essentially, right? So we're talking about everyone, all of those providers, but then kind of getting tied back to what you're talking about. I mean, I would endorse us putting another bullet in here to talk about how the creation of a new behavioral health structure that the Behavioral Health Administration is really tasked to doing utilizes and better incorporates individuals with lived experience, peers, and everyone else interested in behavioral health to be actively involved in, I mean, what the system looks like for people, right? So I guess is that the piece that we add here to 4 with, sorry, my dog's going crazy in the Amazon must be here. Let me. Sorry about that. But yeah, so I guess with the adding that bullet, how do folks feel about that? Adding a specific bullet related to, I mean, essentially advising how the new state system looks, and I guess what should that actual bullet say?
Possibly something about including subject matter experts of family members, peers, persons in recovery, something like that, to start it off.
What if it said something along the lines of subject matter experts include but are not limited to peers, family, people receiving services, and also providers. I did some trauma-informed care trainings, and frontline staff are frequently left out of developing trauma-informed care. And when they're left out, it just causes problems for everyone. So I don't know. I think it's good to have all voices at the table. That's what I like.
It seems to me we're essentially just talking about keeping BPAC, but having it move under the Behavioral Health Administration. I mean, we're talking about what we're doing, right? So is it really that we're asking them to not dissolve this group, but keep this group in some form? So we could just use BPAC as the example of all those things just listed in that bullet. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're thinking there, like utilize subject matter experts, including currently established.
Yeah, I mean,
Boards and
why dissolve
commissions.
and recreate
Like,
something? Yeah.
how thoughts on that?
That's higher level. That's good.
Where are we at with this?
When we get past this last bullet, this is Margie, I do have a question about the now fourth bullet.
Go ahead, Margie.
I just want to make sure that, again, in the child serving mental health system, we're not always talking about recovery because it's just a different world at that point. So I think it's so important to have effective transition services, but I think to be inclusive of not just the recovery piece of it, but for treatment. And I don't know whether it's another bullet, but there is I'm just grasping at language, but I found a document that we put together a long time ago, but it's transition. Children and youth should be ensured smooth transitions through all major changes in their lives. It's really that concept of transition is not just in recovery in regards to children and youth.
Across the continuum, would that be a better wording?
Yeah, I think it's just something that's inclusive of all under the kind of the criteria of the block grant. But I mean, it may be across the treatment continuum. Yeah, I think that would be broader rather than specific. Or if there's a way to include both.
So Julie,
Possibly across the treatment and through the recovery continuum? Do we do it that way, or?
I'm just saying that the mental health component of this is broader than just the word recovery is not always applicable in the child and family mental health realm. So it's children if a child is 5 years old and is having, it has a mental health diagnosis, we certainly wouldn't use the word the child is in recovery. So I think it's just because the Planning Council is both for, for mental health and substance use, I just need to make sure that we have that included in this sentence. Because just from my own experience, transition for youth, just transitioning from different living, let's say out of home placements, schools, that transition component is so critically important to be done well in that world as well as in treatment specific for recovery. And I'm probably not saying this well, but
No, that makes sense. Thank you. I was wondering about also something with wraparound services we often use in transition, if that would maybe make more sense. Anybody have suggestions on how to encompass what Margie is saying there?
What about the continuum of care or care continuum?
yeah, I mean, I think that takes it through that whole spectrum of whatever phase you're in. And obviously our council is from birth to death is who falls under our parameters.
I just want to mention that continuum of care is actually in the homelessness realm. So I'm not sure that it would get confused here, but it's pieces of Colorado. We have 3 continuum of cares in Colorado in homelessness services. So I don't think it would get confused here, but I just want to point that out, that somebody reading this might go, oh, continuum of care is Denver for balance of state and North Range for up north. So I just want to point that out.
Would stages of care, I don't know. It's hard to come up with a specific word that's all encompassing. But and treatment is important. So
What about fund more effective transition services for wraparound, for behavioral health, wraparound services? What if we still put in wraparound services rather than continuum to create less confusion?
I guess, Julie, the problem is that not everybody's going to know what wraparound is, number one, and number two, not everyone has that available to them. I mean, I think it's there is a concept of what wraparound is, and
because that can really include a lot of different services, a lot.
Right.
Gotcha.
And I think that part of transition is how are we ensuring that whole continuum of care, use that wrong word, that we have available a broad spectrum of levels of care.
And then someone suggested in the chat just ending it at services, fund more effective transition services, period.
I think that would be perfect.
Short and simple. Going once and gone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine, for that suggestion. That was very helpful. All right, are we on a motion for 4? Are we at that point?
I'll make a motion to proceed.
Second.
Okay, so motion and second to approve recommendation number 4, strengthen coordination among all organizations providing service across the continuum by endorsing collaboration and promoting warm handoffs and standardized information sharing. So I see some thumbs up. Thumbs up, hands up. If you're in agreement and want to support this recommendation, saw a lot of those hands. Can I go the other side? Anyone opposed or anyone interested in abstaining from the vote to move recommendation number 4? Hearing none, unanimous it is. Right, next up, number 5. So integrate peers throughout the entire system of behavioral health and continue to evaluate peer-based support as critical and evidence-based.
Elevate peer-based support rather than evaluate.
Oh, elevate, sorry.
Is it,
Well,
critical really makes it sound to me like it's not going to happen if there is no peer-based support. It definitely is evidence-based, but it not critical.
About writing.
I hear what Marcella is saying, but two things, like to integrate, we already are. So maybe like promoting the growth of it or however we want to word it. And around critical, as
maybe the word valuable
support services, we don't want to say that we're more critical than treatment or prevention, because we're not.
Oh, yeah,
It
no.
needs to be that whole continuum of care.
I like valuable.
Valuable.
Valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peer-based support as valuable and evidence-based.
And like I was saying with the integration of it, you know, we already are, and we have been for a while. That workforce is growing and growing and growing. So I don't know what other word we could use that doesn't limit, like, meaning integrate kind of sounds like to me like we're not there yet, but there are peers and peer recovery specialists in all realms of the continuum of care already. So maybe like continue to grow it or something around those lines. I don't know if some of the other people doing peer work want to chime in on this as well. I mean, this is kind of the recovery's, this is our bullet point.
Would promote growth of peers throughout the entire system of behavioral health maybe be better?
Maybe promote continuous growth, or yeah, something like that. I like that better than integrate.
James, I really like the beginning, integrate peers throughout the entire system of behavioral health. I think that's powerful. So if that means growing it, if that means developing those peers, if that integrating peers throughout the entire system of behavioral health, I really like that statement. I think it's powerful.
What about just adding and growing? So integrate and continuous growth of peers throughout.
For me, it's implied on integrate.
Okay.
I mean, integrating it means you're going to grow them, you're going to develop them, and you're going to put them in place. I just love that first statement of the entire document. This is the one that really excited me, the beginning of that statement. Yeah, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. We have to do whatever we do and then integrate them throughout the entire system of behavioral health.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well. Now that you say it that way, if you're that excited about it, then that's the impact that I need to have with this statement is, you know, that all the other continuums of care are excited about the integration of peers into their workforce for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and then I like that it says, and continue to elevate peer-based support as valuable and evidence-based.
Yep.
Maybe maybe that could be just the beginning, and we could drop down the rest of it, that area, to a different bullet, and that way we capture that was the essence of what we're trying to do. I also have a thought. Most of the peer workforce right now are working underneath providers. It'd be nice to develop autonomous peer services that are free to be able to run effective services their own way.
Natalie?
In a way that is happening through recovery community organizations and recovery community centers like RCOs and RCCs. You know, they're standalone from treatment providers and other clinical services. You know, they're their own thing.
Even the autonomous peer services that are being billed through Medicaid right now, though, require professional oversight.
In that realm, yes.
That's a Medicaid issue, though.
Yeah.
Not an OBH issue. To be billable.
I'm just saying that, you know, it'd be nice if there was that independence part that we can look towards, not necessarily address right now.
Okay. My comment was related to, are we implying that family support specialists are included in that peer role? We're not really addressing the family support peer role.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, just with that first bullet point, like OBH establishing training and credentialing, that's already done, you know, through the Colorado peer and family support specialists through IC and RC and COPA. But I think integrating the family peers and stuff like that, I think you have a very valid point there.
This is Margie. I would highly support that because the family advocate, family support specialist is, there are unique differences between that and the trainings for the peer. So I really appreciate Natalie bringing that, and I would say I couldn't vote for it unless we did include the family component to this.
As a different bullet, Marjorie, or?
There are family advocates, and there is a family advocate training that there's a definition for family advocate actually in the Colorado State. It's part of the piece of legislation that defined family advocate. So it is it's a position people are paid to be family advocates, and it's a lot of similarities, but also some unique pieces to it that are different from the training for a peer specialist, and so a lot of work has gone into that position as well.
Margie, can I ask a question? Is the family advocate up here is someone who has lived experience?
It's a person that has a child that they've raised, so they have that lived experience, so that they are they might be a consumer as well, but they're coming to that having had the experience of raising a child, adolescent with mental health or behavioral health issues.
Thank you. It's kind of along the lines of an ally or family member of somebody that has been affected by mental health or substance use disorder.
Now say that again.
Like we call them allies or family members of people that have been affected by substance use or mental health.
It would, I mean, for example, I've been trained as a family advocate because I have a son that has, from when he was little. And so that was part of my lived experience in that role. But it's working with the family versus working with it's working with the entire family on those issues. And it brings into it a different perspective than as I am the consumer with a mental health or substance use experience. This is from
Marjorie,
that family
Marjorie, that sounds so important. So that I feel like that deserves the same attention that number 5 has. I think number 5 is really powerful in terms of peers with lived experience that are trained specifically for this area. And then the advocates for families, if we could dedicate something that powerful to that role as opposed to mixing them, because I think one or the other, the number 5 will be somewhat diluted by including that, and yet yours is just as important. So
maybe keep in mind the certification for peers is Colorado's Certified Peer and Family Specialist. So they are included in this peer-led workforce.
But they're not called the same, right? They're not peers, they're advocates. I think it's just so powerful if we could, those two systems are so valuable that if we could identify some language that would be specific to the advocates. Because the process couldn't, just like this one, is so enhanced, it's so greatly improved by these advocates that if we could write a statement in the same way about the advocates, that's what I would recommend.
Marcella, I think that, I mean, it can go either way, but I think recognizing for this, maybe James, it could have the family and peer words in this, and then come up with a separate bullet that would capture that that family advocate workforce as well. And because I'm not as quick as everybody, there is language that we could pull from that would be very specific to this. And if I can find it real quickly, I will put that in the chat. But I know you want to finalize this today, so.
So for now, in the first bullet, could we just word, or could we add to that sentence and family support advocates or family support?
Family advocate, I mean, if we could
family
just say that,
advocates
and family advocate workforce at the state
Okay.
level. But
For peer
I
and
think
family.
what James is saying is that there are those trainings that already are there. So I don't know that establishing training and credentialing wouldn't then be
Yeah, I think this is where we go back to our initial conversation that we had a couple months ago. And is it that we want OBH to maybe coordinate or collaborate with? Or
I mean, we just had like the Sunrise Review and all that stuff to really keep the peer certification out of DORA and out of the Office of Behavioral Health.
Right. So we don't want to do that.
But I think that establishing training, that can be something that's added without affecting COPA, because there is definitely a lack of training right now for the certifications.
Yeah, that works. Taking out the credentialing piece works.
So are we talking here about OBH establishing training for peer and family advocate workforce and how it is integrated or elevated and promoted and grown across the full continuum, including, Ty, this is for you, standalone peer-run organizations that aren't, like James, exactly what you're talking about with the RSSOs, the RCOs, right? So it's not a state level credential, because James, just like you said, like we just had the bill last year that that's the bullet that makes me the most nervous. Like recommendation, I mean, we're gonna have to come back and be like, there's a bill last year that is Sunrise Review that said no to this. But if we're talking about something else, and like James, going back to when we started this about really that promotion and continuing to grow workforce, and maybe that's what we tie the training to, is that how do we better utilize peers across the continuum as well as within peer-run organizations?
No, I like
training
I
that
like
OBH
that, Ryan.
could do?
I agree, Ryan.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep, I do as well.
So so instead of established trainings, would it be recognizing trainings that are available?
Well, part
for
of it is
peer?
that there's not enough. There's not enough. It's hard to come across those trainings. So there is a bit of establishment that needs to happen too, I believe.
So it could be kind of like establishing peer-based training. You know, there's a lot of trainings out there, and it usually has that clinical component, which peer and family, we don't work from the clinical realm. So I agree with what everybody's kind of saying. There's not enough training out there that's peer specific.
And this is Margie, and I guess I agree with that totally. And this is my bias, and it then has to be recognized. And so we want to just make sure that whatever trainings we are promoting, that they are in turn are not competing with trainings that maybe have the state level of approval, or
well, I think
want people to be trained in something that others will recognize and as viable trainings. Because sometimes we have been training people that then another training comes along and then they say, oh, well, then that one doesn't count. I don't want to mislead any more people by being trained and then finding out that nobody really wants to use that training.
No, I hear what you're, you know, that was the huge loss in in losing brass tacks, because that was really a certifiable training, resource.
Yeah,
So
it was wonderful what they provided. I
was
agree.
really, a lot of it was peer based and led towards that. There's certain ones like Faces and Voices of Recovery and that, but I agree. So I think establishing and growing maybe, trainings that are specific, but also state recognizable as this is, you can use this for your credentialing.
Yeah, no, and it would be so important that the state then in turn says, yes, we will recognize those trainings.
And even more so, like that COPA or IC and RC, the actual people that hold the credentialing, say, yes, this is acceptable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was trying to go with that, the collaboration with those organizations too. So there's got to be some communication perhaps between the state and COPA and IRC.
Which I know there's probably some other people on here that are actually in the COPA meetings and stuff like that. So I think there definitely could be collaboration, around that for sure.
Okay.
It still might be good to integrate peers and family advocates throughout the entire system in the sentence above.
Oh, in the description above?
Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And then the bullet could also just read, OBH will establish and coordinate peer and family advocate-based training, period.
Well, what if we kept that as a third bullet instead of deleting it and just make that a different bullet? OBH will support peer and family workforce growth.
Yep, that would be good.
That way we're still capturing what Ty is talking about and reinforcing the need for peers and family advocates. That gives it a little more oomph.
Okay, what do you guys think of number 5? Any other suggestions or additions, changes?
Yeah, on that, now it's the third point. I put it something in the chat. I don't quite understand how recommendations for the OBH block grant can make employers be required to do something. The recommended block grant is about funding money to add, helping OBH determine where to put funding.
Yeah,
That's like a law that would tell employers to do something.
could that be changed to OBH will offer professional support and development to employers that is specific to peer workforce, ensuring supervisors are competent in managing staff and peer support roles?
Yeah, I agree that this is a need, especially in behavioral health organizations. I think there are people out there that are supervising peers that don't know how to supervise peers. But if you wanted to make it stronger, then the other option, again, I don't know if this has to do with the block grant though, is that OBH, they don't license everybody, but they do license certain organizations in the state. And it could become a possible licensing requirement. But I don't know if that has anything to do with the block grant. Ryan, you have thoughts?
Yeah, Laura, I think you're right on, is that the hard and fast employers, I mean, makes it a little bit tough, because it sounds like, yeah, that is a bill to, but if we wanted to go to a specific OBH licensed and designated providers shall do this, but I think it even is better that if we tie this back to kind of the training component and having OBH be more involved in professional support and development within our organizations that we regulate, to better promote how peers, I mean, across the continuum are utilized, and part of that utilization is ensuring that there's a supervision structure and oversight structure that works for both the organizations as well as the peers providing services. So there's a clear, this is what peers do in this type of organization, which is going to vary depending on what, I mean, along the continuum, what type of services the peers are providing, whether it's a peer within a treatment organization, whether it's a peer-run organization that is independent. I mean, I think that's a little bit nuanced there. So, so I guess back to that, what are your thoughts on this that really remove that employer across the board requirement, making it more specific to offering that support and development for?
I really like that, Ryan. This is Marcella, because I'm also concerned along the same spirit of the final part, including ensuring supervisors at these employers, ensuring supervisors are competent in managing staff in peer support roles. What would that mean? That OBH would come in and evaluate our staff? I don't know how that would, that one is really unique. The whole idea of, I don't know that we can do that to employers, and I don't know how OBH would be able to, unless through an audit or an interview, ensuring that supervisors at these employers are competent in managing staff in peer support roles. I think that would be my job. It would be the job of directors of, do you see what I mean? I don't know how OBH would do that.
Because, yeah, I mean, it feels like it's then tying to some sort of approval process or some sort of credentialing requirement for organizations that this is your supervision structure, which is fairly tough, right? Unless there's hard and fast, like, yeah, ensuring supervisors, like, is it a policy? Is that this is how supervisors, which is kind of arbitrary there, right? So then seeing some.
Maybe it should say including supervisors in managing. So just take out ensuring and then competent. Including supervisors managing staff and peer support roles.
All right, so OBH will offer professional support and development that is specific to peer and family.
And somehow I'd like to say something about supervisors being qualified for peer support services and family advocates. We have a lot of CACs that want, you know, I think the training that our peers have had and supervisory training is very essential to that, being qualified to supervise. So something about that.
I agree, like some kind of, I mean, in an ideal world, you would have an actual peer supervising peers, but we know that that's not really, to have this workforce work, so that's not always going to be the case. So at least having some training around how to supervise a peer, in their recovery support services, from a non-clinical standpoint. I would agree.
Yes.
With that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because we don't provide clinical services. So getting supervision in a clinical realm can sometimes be very confusing and dilute what a peer does in recovery support services.
Yeah, and it is a specialized supervisory role. They have to know there's a big difference between the clinical and that peer functioning.
I just also want to echo that peer what peers offer is different, and sometimes we draw and use upon our lived experience, and our boundaries are what we do. It's not the same as professional. That said, supervision is really key to peer services and preventing burnout and secondary trauma, as well as making sure that we keep a healthy boundaries is just so important. So supervision for peers really needs to be developed a lot better, in my opinion, because it kind of mixes both worlds, but it's a world unto itself.
Yes.
How about that? So OBH will develop and offer professional support and development that is specific to peer and family advocate workforce, including best practices for supervising a peer workforce. So it feels like that's kind of what we're talking about, is like, how do we get there with, maybe it's not the clinical oversight that we're specifically talking about, it's more of just the generally talking about how do you best utilize and support this, I mean, this very valuable piece of your organization, but maybe best practices isn't right, is, I mean, but it kind of goes back to the how. Oh, sorry, Karen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What if we said something like support, training and development on the first sentence?
And Ryan, you could use create instead of develop to just not have too much develop and developing going on.
Support, training and development.
This?
Yeah.
So what are we thinking about this versus what was previous in there, is that supervisors managing staff and peer support roles? Thoughts on best practices? Is that what we're talking about? Is that creating and offering those trainings about best practices for supervising the peer, or it would be peer and family advocate workforce? I beat you to it, Margie.
I think it's good.
Throw out that there's what's called the behavioral partnership, and we worked on a document that defined Colorado peer and family specialists. And of course, that's what I'm trying desperately to find, but I don't know how to get out of this, so I can go into that. But just reading off one of the, and I'm not sure if this was our final version, peer and support specialists and peer, well, for Colorado peer and family specialists, are individuals living in recovery from mental health and/or substance use disorders that use their lived experience to help others seeking wellness and recovery. A CPFS must successfully complete a training program to develop their skills in social emotional support, advocacy, communication, and coaching. So I'm just thinking something, kind of that piece of what was described in that document on really, I think, exemplifies what we're talking about in having these training programs that do that type of process. Just a thought.
Ryan, we just need to add the word "and" between peer and family at the end of that last sentence.
Ryan, is your first and third bullet point redundant now?
I think we need to clarify. So I was more thinking that 3 is more talking specifically about
The supervisors, right?
organizational training
Okay,
and
yeah.
development, and 1 is more talking about general training about peer. But I mean, absolutely, I think they look very similar.
Caitlin, help us. Can we combine it and define it better?
I think now that we took out the whole requirement about employers.
Right, I agree
the
with
third,
you, Marcel.
I think you can't, they are so similar that we could probably combine it now because we've removed the whole thing of making employers responsible and then coming in and auditing, ensuring that employers are doing the right thing. I think it can be combined somehow.
Yeah, I think the first one can be deleted.
Yeah, because I kind of like where it goes with the first bullet then, which would be number 2. OBH will support peer and family workforce growth. And part of that is through, I mean, professional support training and development, including supervising, which kind of goes into the whole realm of training. And we're not like creating something that looks similar to all the IC and RC stuff from COPA that they already have. That is maybe similar to bullet 1.
Okay.
Sorry, I interrupted someone. Like that. So if we start getting rid of these strike throughs, how's this look?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Karen's gonna have her name all over this document.
Guess I better be quiet for a while.
So here's an opportunity. So motion and a second to approve recommendation number 5, integrate peer and family advocates throughout the entire system of behavioral health and continue to elevate peer and family-based support is valuable and evidence-based. So all in favor, thumbs up, raise hand. Anyone opposed? So I guess I'll give people opportunity to hands down. Anyone opposed or wishing to abstain from this recommendation? Throw the unanimous on this one as well. Last one up. Here. So recommendation 6, conduct an additional assessment on behavioral landscape in rural and frontier Colorado. OBH will work with providers in these regions to monitor availability of services and fund expansion when possible. And then funding will include expansion of telehealth to increase workforce availability and access to service across the continuum.
I would suggest getting rid of the word additional and putting in what we want. What are we trying to actually assess? Access, provider workforce, delivery of services. Additional doesn't necessarily really make sense to me there.
I like that, Laura, because I think the additional almost makes it it sound a little bit like it's an afterthought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laura. I think it should be specific.
And I might say evaluation versus assessment, or maybe we have a good reason for using assessment as the word there.
Evaluation.
And what is it that we're actually assessing? Are we assessing workforce shortages or hesitancy or stigma, or what is it that we're assessing?
This recommendation came from the recovery conversation, so I feel like we can kind of lean on that for guidance.
I think it was, if I remember correctly, this was more about access of services. Are there enough services in these populations to provide resources?
Yeah, Ryan changed that sentence, and I like how he put that: an array of behavioral health services in rural and frontier Colorado.
I feel like culturally appropriate should be in there in some sense. I've spent a lot of time in rural areas. My mom likes to live in rural areas, and she's a huge mental health advocate. And I work on PAMI and working with people with disabilities, also on Silk. And rural and frontier communities, they vary from area to area dramatically. Some areas have, as my mom would say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, where you need to really, you know, it's not wrong to get help. Well, it is in a sense. You need to be able to do things for yourself, where other areas are very supportive and caring and community driven. I also want to just mention that some areas are scary. The area in which my mom lives in, you know, people with developmental disabilities are often kind of hidden away from the public and the community and not allowed to participate outside. There was one 9-year-old boy who had severe autism. The parents wanted to put this person in hospice care and then remove the feeding tube. And the hospice, the parent, and the court were all in favor of this. And it's scary to think that people with disabilities can be killed because of their disability. You know, I mean, I really believe that independent living should be available to anybody, no matter how severe the disability. So I don't want to say that they're backwards, but I do feel like some rural and frontier communities are behind the times. And we need to make sure that we create treatment that is safe and not harmful and accessible to people in various communities. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking too much.
So if we added the word culturally appropriate in front of behavioral health services, Ty, would that feel like that covers that?
I think that helps. there are definitely other things that I brought up, but I don't know how you would cover. So that would be my suggestion. Yes.
I think most people
Could I ask a question regarding so the first one says we're going to evaluate, or somebody is, and then it says OBH will work with providers to monitor the availability. So
I have a suggestion. I'm stuck on that second sentence too, Marcella. First of all, I don't think we should say when possible. We're making a recommendation, not when possible. We're saying do this. I would say OBH will utilize the evaluation results to monitor availability of services and fund needed expansions. That makes sense, everybody?
Like it.
It does to me. Yep.
Yeah, we're not asking permission for our suggestions. We are suggesting.
So I think people would be surprised if you knew what was available out in rural and frontier Colorado, speaking as someone that's worked there for 20 years. And the issue isn't always provider shortages. The issue is sometimes stigma. The issue is sometimes culture, as Ty was mentioning. And there are unique ways to reach out and meet people where they are in rural and frontier Colorado versus urban areas. I don't know if I have the solution. I know that we're trying to do more mental health first aid training and a new program that trains people with a conversation starter so that you can get neighbors checking on neighbors and helping neighbors, because it's really, it's who you know, it's being able to talk to someone that you trust, and it just works differently out there. So if we could add another bullet about barriers to care, assessing barriers to care. What is it about the rural and frontier communities that keep people from accessing what's already available? Is anyone else rural who can speak to that?
We have IDEA in Brighton, and yes, sometimes people travel a long ways to get to our location in Brighton, even Southwell County, pretty far east, that travel all the way to Brighton because of the lack of services. And then even the referring agents seem lack information and awareness of what their referrals are required to do when the services aren't available in their own area. They're not aware of the barriers, so clients get in trouble for not being able to comply and do everything that's court mandated, both by social services, by the way, and probation and parole. So it's across the board. It is quite tragic. And I've been asked many times, but I don't see that anything has really changed in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been asked.
Ryan, can you add culturally responsive after array of at the top of that sentence?
One of the things that I've seen recently with providers is that people will come to urban areas for treatment or for some sort of services, but then they go back to the Western Slope or Southern Colorado. They've lost their sense of community. And so I'm glad we're including the telehealth, because I've seen a lot of providers include that in as kind of keeping people connected even after they leave an organization.
Could I ask, Julie, now it seems to imply that all of the behavioral health services are culturally responsive.
Yes, you're right. I apologize. How do we incorporate that word? Because that covers some of Ty's concerns, and that was Margie's suggested wording. So where can that fit, guys? What do you think?
So I think to monitor right after that, because we're going to the evaluation to monitor the need for services. that's probably where we could include that they be culturally responsive.
So after the word monitor, culturally responsive? Or, oh no, monitor the need for, sorry Ryan, you were right, for culturally responsive services, yeah.
And I just wanted to thank Nancy and I think it was Nancy, and that the bullet on evaluation the barriers, because that was exactly what I was talking about. You know, it's a lot of stigma and bias and cultural attitudes, and it's not necessarily always the provider's fault. You know, that we are having these problems out there. So I think that's a good start.
And then could I ask, Brian, maybe this is for you, because we're hearing so much these days about the fact that the waiver to provide telehealth services, virtual services, will be removed sometime this summer. So is this one, the last bullet of telehealth, is that specific only to the rural areas? Because we're hearing.
I would think there needs to be generally some telehealth provisions moving forward after the state of emergency ends, right? So that's I think what you're referencing, right? Is that there's state of emergency, there's talk that eventually that's going to run out once the states start opening up more. So then across the board, we have to better utilize telehealth, and that this is specific to telehealth services in rural and frontier need to be in the forefront to ensure that there are culturally appropriate or culturally responsive services being delivered in these regions that kind of can start circumventing the or addressing the stigma that rural and frontier counties have experienced with what behavioral health even is. So if we start cleaning some of this stuff up, I know we're running right up to the end here. So
could you make the second bullet, the second sentence in the recommendation and the second bullet seem redundant to me? Like, could you make the second sentence the second bullet?
Yeah, that's originally what I was thinking, that like strong OBH will conduct an evaluation on the array of behavioral services in rural and frontier Colorado. And then start from there as the bullets that the evaluation will address barriers to service delivery and connection to community resources, trying to get at that there's, without flat out saying like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like do it yourself. You don't need behavioral health support. We need to get over that without specifically saying like, that's not the appropriate way to respond to a behavioral health crisis, right? It's trying to get what I'm getting at with bullet one. And then exactly, Caitlin, are we comfortable with the second bullet replacing the second sentence in the 6?
Yes, except the second bullet needs the addition of culturally responsive.
That's what I was intending when, as Nancy was speaking, I was typing that into the chat, try and capture the differences of the rural population and the outreach and rural culture that is needed.
This is Margie. I also think that the transition services are critically important in the rural communities, because again, people are coming to Denver area or wherever to get services, but then having to go back without any transition services in place that will help them when they're in their day-to-day life. They shouldn't have to come to Denver to get your care. I have a family member that lives in Eagle County and has to get their care from Children's Hospital. That's not okay when your child's in crisis.
Okay,
Like
Ryan
that,
added transition services at the end of that sentence. Does that work, Margie?
Yeah, thank you. I just think that's a really important one for us not to lose.
How are we feeling about this? Like we ready for a motion? Is that hand up, Laura? You motion this one? Second, I'm looking at you, Karen.
I'll second this one.
Okay, Ty.
Yeah,
Ty
I
wins
thought
out
I'd
on
be
that one.
quiet this time.
So yeah, here's that opportunity. Motion, a second to approve recommendation number 6. OBH will conduct the evaluation on the array of behavioral health services in rural and frontier Colorado. Any additional comments? I see a bunch of thumbs up, which I'm guessing that is the yes for this. Motion to approve that one, and the vote, yes. So I see some hands, like we'll go the other way. Anyone opposed or wishing to abstain from voting on this recommendation number 6? Julie, I'm guessing your thumbs up was the yes. So unanimous there. So the one piece on the agenda that we didn't address today was the OBH updates. Don, I'll work with you to just get my outline sent to you, which will include the list of all of the bills working through the session right now. So you have that, as well as some links to our OBH newsletter that went out a couple weeks back now, just so you have all that stuff that you can read offline. But I'll kick it back to our wonderful chairs to close it
Thank you,
out.
everybody. What a great, wonderful group of recommendations you guys have developed over the course of the last 6 months and have fine-tuned today in a way that makes so much sense and I think will be a huge benefit to our communities and our state as a whole. So thank you for all your efforts. Thank you for your attention and for your focus and your input. We couldn't have done this without you. You guys are just tremendous. And I think we should all feel proud of what we've come up with to submit to OBH today. So thank you for that. Next month we will hear from OBH. Then we will have a couple-month break, come back in September, vote new leadership in, have goodbyes from those that are leaving, and you guys will begin a new journey in October. So please be thinking about who's going to put their hat in the ring for leadership positions. We need both co-chairs filled and we need the membership committee chair filled. So contemplate that and maybe consider throwing that out there even next month if you are able to make that decision by then. And again, thank you for all your efforts today and throughout the last 6 months. I think this is a tremendous group of recommendations. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Gee.